What actually happens if you 3D print with expired resin? Will all of the prints fail? Should you just throw away the bottle, or is there still liquid gold in there? These are all the questions I had when I found this random bottle of resin in a cupboard still in its bubble wrap. To find out what happens, I propose a set of experiments, brothers, which will give us all of the answers to the questions asked before. But before we do this, we need to do some much needed maintenance. With the vat empty of months old resin, I gave the expired resin bottle a real good shake. One interesting thing from the first pour is that it looks like every other grey resin I've used before. But I know that's because I've just shook it all together, and the real test will be how it reacts with printing. Before I can start printing off the experiments, I need to calibrate my resin 3D printer for this resin by printing off some exposure finders. If this is your first time seeing these, then oh boy, you need to make sure any new type of resin you're using, you are printing these off to at least get into the ballpark of the optimum exposure time. Not only will it make your prints look better, but it will make failures less likely. This is sort of a mini experiment in itself, because what I found out will actually benefit me later on. You see, resin separates after some time untouched in the vat. Most new resins take a couple of days in my experience. This resin, however, was separated a lot faster, and after stirring it with my spatula, it seems it takes a lot more effort to get the pigment and binders back together again. Nothing too big at the moment, but later on with what I have planned to print, this could be a problem. For the first of my experiments, I want to print a couple of different infantry models. So the print time won't be more than a few hours. This should be short enough for the resin to not break down, and will be a good test to see how it affects details on minis. I should say that the temperature in the shed where this is printing is currently 30 degrees, which is 86 freedom units. This is probably the most ideal circumstances for this resin experiment, so I might have to keep some in the bottle and revisit this when the environment isn't so favorable. If you want to see that, then leave a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed. We have just crossed 30k subscribers, which is insane. So we are currently in our heresy era, but 40k subscribers would be so cool for much obvious reasons. The models I used for this test were the Valor Corps infantry men from the designer The Maker's Cult. I also used some infantry from the Dredge line of minis by Mezgag, and I also used some of the Orcas line from Station Forge. I chose these models because they have, in my opinion, the best pre-supports currently available. But that's just the first test. I really want to stress this resin and try something a lot bigger. So far, I've printed exposure finders and infantry, which are both small. But the real test will be if I can print something big. Like really big. And I have the perfect file to use. Station Forge has this giant bug which I have wanted to print since it came out, but just haven't had the courage to commit fully because I was unsure if it would match the rest of my NID army. I also have a problem where I find models I want to print, but then quickly get distracted by other new shiny models to print and just end up pushing it further down the list, which is probably my biggest problem with 3D printing because there's just so much good stuff to print and just so little time. This big bug will take a few plates to finish, but not only will the big test be if the resin holds up for printing these legs, because they take a whopping 27 hours, but I actually don't know if I will have enough resin to print this. So, the longest 27 hours passed, but it was worth it because it was a success. However, we can't celebrate too early, brothers. Just because they printed off okay doesn't mean the details are going to be there, which on a model like this will be super noticeable. With the first plate a success, I printed out more plates that took over 24 hours each. Everything was going so smooth. I can't wait to see how the details come out when it's cured. That was until I got to the body of the bug. This plate is roughly 200 grams of resin. However, I'm not sure there is 200 grams of resin left in the vat, and I have no more left in my bottle. So I have to make a decision on whether to print it or not. I mean, for the sake of the experiment, I just had to press print and leave it in the hands of the machine god. I don't have much hope in this working, brother, but then something interesting happened. The whole plate looks like it's printed, but I also ran out of resin. So I'm not sure whether to celebrate my narrow victory or mourn 27 hours being wasted. Everything actually seems okay until I noticed one small giveaway detail. So here is exactly where the resin ran out. But if I'm going to be really honest here, I don't think there was much left, and I think I could use this part of the body because not only could it be battle damage from a chunk of the shell being blown off in battle, but it will be a reminder to me of this challenge. However, even though I have now ran out of resin, this is actually perfect because now I can print the rest of the bug off with another standard resin that's in date and compare the details side by side. Here's a pro tip for if this happens to you and you run out of resin mid-print. My best piece of advice is to pour in a small amount of your new resin like I do, and then with a support from a previous print, run your printer's vat clean function so the entire screen size can be peeled up in one go, which will pull any of that old resin that might have cured to the FEP away. But more importantly, if you're looking to get involved in the 3D printing community, then you should join my Patreon and get access to possibly the best Discord in the multiverse, where we host themed monthly events as well as a load of other things, and we have some of the smartest, most helpful people I have ever met. So if that sounds like something you'd like, then click the link in the description or pinned comment down below. I printed the rest of the big bug with the standard resin, and there is absolutely no way 1 kilogram of resin was going to do this. I don't know what I was thinking. With all of the parts printed, I cured the bug parts and the infantry from earlier and started to assemble them with Gorilla Glue Super Glue Gel. So far, the expired resin has honestly been like using normal resin. Some parts don't want to stick together, other parts latch on straight away. To see if the infantry details came out okay, I have compared them side by side with some that I have printed before on the same printer. Now, YouTube does compress the video, but hopefully you can see the difference, if there is any. But what about the big bug? Considering this is like 10 Space Marines tall, probably more, the details will be more obvious. Here is the big bug himself. However, I have just realized that there's no way I can print a base big enough to put this bug on. So what actually happens if you 3D print with expired resin? Well, in terms of details, it seems to be perfectly fine. And the only difference I've noticed is actually in between prints, the resin separates quicker and feels like it takes longer to stir everything back together again. But if you have some expired resin and have been unsure whether to use it, then fire away, brothers. If you like this type of video, then hit the like button down below. Let me know in the comments as well, and I'll print a Titan in more expired resin that I found, which is shockingly even more out of date. If you like seeing big models being printed, then you should watch this video next, because I 3D printed possibly the easiest Titan to print. Of course, I would like to give a huge thanks to all my Patreon and channel members, because without your support, none of this would be possible, and I'll see you all in the Discord.